At the word hood, I think of a person, a place, and perhaps even a thing. I'm Sir Creepsta, and welcome to Muhlenberg County Ghost Stories from the Hood. Tonight's tale of terror is entitled The Holytown Dogman. Usually, when one hears the word holy, one is quick to associate it with something sacred and pure, the exact same way that most view the Bible as being. But if one were to add the word town to it, you would be correct to assume that it's referring to a particular place that was occupied by a bunch of God-fearing people. Whether that was true or not is something that was never determined. All I know is that the north section of town that I grew up in was given that name by those who lived there at the time, many years prior to my birth. But before I proceed any further, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And don't forget to click on the little bell icon so that you can be notified each and every time I upload a new one. With that being said, sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and be entertained by yet another Muhlenberg County ghost story from the Hood. Holytown wasn't a very large section of the city by any means. It was only occupied by a handful of people when I was young, growing up in the hood of Central City. To me, Holytown always appeared to be more like a ghost town than anything else. There weren't many houses in that section of town, and many of the ones there were vacant and slightly run down. It always had this strange and eerie aura about itself. At least it did to me anyways. Reason being, it was located smack dead in the middle of the woods near that section of town. As kids, we would often ride our bikes there to visit with friends and family for the most part. But sometimes we would park our bikes and just wander off into the woods and enjoy the nature and wildlife the woods offered. Then there were times that we would rummage through the empty, creepy abandoned houses, seeking out whatever we could find. We were always very cautious of the critters that may have taken shelter and made a home for themselves in the empty houses. Occasionally, we get spooked by a skunk, a possum, stray cat, or dogs. But for the most part, we rarely ran into anything while rummaging through the empty rooms of the houses. We do most of our exploring in Holytown during the daylight hours, because once it got dark, Holytown seemed to transform into something straight out of a Stephen King novel. That's when the fog would make its way in from the many ponds that were located nearby and appear to blanket that section of town with a mist so thick that you could barely see your hands in front of your face. I had to be around 12 or 13 when myself and a couple of my closest friends were hanging out, just chilling on the railroad tracks that went through the hood, when one of the older kids from the hood approached us and asked us if we wanted to go out into Holytown and see something cool that he had stumbled upon while doing some deer hunting there in the woods. Having nothing to do at the time, and noticing that we still had a good amount of daylight left, we all looked at one another and agreed to go with him, as long as the trip would be short and quick. The older kid assured us that it would, telling us that all he wanted to do was show us what he had found, and then we'd all be on our way back to the hood. So off to Holytown we went. Holytown wasn't far from where we were hanging out at the time. It was only a few minutes walk straight down the railroad tracks. Once we started walking, one of my friends noticed something about the older kid that we hadn't noticed at first, and that was a rifle the older kid had slung over his back. How we all missed it, I don't know. When we asked him about the rifle and why he was carrying it with him, his reply was that he had just had it just in case we happened to run into some coyotes or wild dogs. Upon hearing this, myself and my two friends simultaneously had this heart-dropping, frightened look upon our faces, seeing that none of us were aware that there were wild dogs or coyotes anywhere near the hood. Nonetheless, we half-heartedly proceeded to walk towards Holytown. But I quickly noticed that this once cheerful bunch of kids hanging out quickly turned into a group of concerned followers, especially once we all realized just how close it was to getting to nightfall. Upon arriving in Holytown, we proceeded to do as we normally did, which was rummage through the abandoned houses one by one, in search of God only knows. As we were about to finish up the last house, out of nowhere, the other kid asked us if we had time to go through one more house. The house that he was referring to was one that we always deliberately chose to avoid each and every time we were out there in Holytown. It was an old, rundown wooden house that sat off deep into the woods by itself. Its appearance alone would creep you out, and none of us was ever willing to go up inside it for reasons unknown. Perhaps it was just the negative vibe we all felt when we were near it. I really don't know. But surprisingly, on this particular evening, we all must have felt the Superman S on our chests, which allowed us to find the courage from somewhere to follow the older kid into the house. After all, the older kid did have a rifle on him for protection, so to us it made us feel somewhat safe, I guess. As we entered this dark, damp shell of a building, the first thing that caught our eyes was this huge, man-made metal cage lying on the floor. What made the cage stick out even more so was that it appeared to have been ripped or torn open by something or someone. The cage was massive, and whatever had been confined inside it had to have been enormous as well as strong. My friends and I quickly looked at one another with a terrified look upon our face, not knowing what had been held against its will inside the cage. At that point, the older kid began to give us the backstory behind this ripped up cage. According to him, he had heard that a group of hunters had tracked down and captured some sort of half-dog, half-man-like beast, and that they had hid it in this wooden house locked inside the cage several months back. When they returned in a few days to check up on the beast, they quickly discovered that the creature had broken out of the cage and had escaped. By now, my friends and I were completely terrified from not knowing what had been inside the cage, nor the whereabouts of it. At that point, we all insisted that the older kid get us the heck up out of there, and that's exactly what he did, seeing that he too was noticeably frightened as well. Once we stepped outside the building, we could clearly see that darkness had fallen and that the fog had begun to set in. So we all struck out running, making it to the hood and to our respective homes in record time. For my remaining childhood years, neither myself nor any of my friends that were with me that day ever again stepped foot back into the abandoned gray wooden house located deep in the woods of Holytown. And to this day, if it in fact was the Dogman inside the large cage, I am more than sure that it still roams the woods near the hood of Central City. I'm Sir Creepsta, and until next time, stay terrified.